Hi, I'm Cameron Peschel, and I'm going to tell you about Henry David Thoreau today. Henry David Thoreau was an American transcendentalist who wrote many books, essays, and articles that displayed his talents. One of his first memories was of staying awake at night, looking through the stars to see if he could see God behind them. He was a leading American transcendentalist who found nature very appealing, as do I. He wrote many books and papers about nature and civil disobedience, too. He was a complex man of many talents who worked hard to shape his craft and life, seeing little difference between them. You may have read or heard of some of his works, such as his most popular, Walden, and Civil Disobedience. In my speech, I'll give you an overview of some of his accomplishments and a few moments in his life. Thoreau was born on July 12, 1817, in Concord, Massachusetts, to John and Cynthia Thoreau. In 1828, he began attending school at the Concord Academy, and then later entered Harvard University at age 16 in 1833. Later, in 1837, he graduated from Harvard and began as a teacher for a brief period of time at Concord Center School, otherwise known as Concord Public School. Thoreau isn't a very well-known person, and so there are a lot of things that people don't know about him, like the fact that while making pencils in his father's pencil factory, he set the woods on fire, or that his brother died after shaving and getting lockjaw. In 1839, the Concord Academy accepted an African-American student, and all of the other white parents moved their kids from the school. In result, the school was shut down until later in the year when Thoreau and his older brother opened it together. Then, in 1840, first John, his older brother, and then Henry both proposed to marry Ellen Sewell, and both of them were rejected because their father didn't believe in transcendentalism. In 1842, after the death of his brother John from lockjaw, which I mentioned earlier, Henry then began to suffer from psychosomatic symptoms. And then finally in 1844, when he was working in his father's pencil factory, Thoreau accidentally set fire to the Concord woods. Most people see a lot of famous writers as people who don't really have a job or anything. They just sit around and write most of the time. But many of them actually do have real jobs aside from their writing, and Thoreau is no exception. In 1838, he began working in his father's pencil factory, where he developed an improved mixture of graphite, which is another little-known fact about him. He gave his first lecture to the Concord Lyceum, which was a forum for expanding the public knowledge in Concord. And then around 1850, he worked frequently as a surveyor and traveled to Canada. In 1845, he built and moved into a one-room cabin at Walden Pond, where he began to work on a week on the Concord and Merrimack Rivers. And then, in 1846, he began work on his most famous book, Walden, and spent a night in jail because he refused to pay a toll tax because he didn't believe in the Mexican War, which the tax supported, so he protested the war by not paying. After 2 years, in 1847, he left the cabin at Walden Pond to live with Ralph Waldo Emerson while he lectured in Europe. In 1849, A Week on the Concord and Merrimack Rivers and Civil Disobedience were published. Then through 1851, he increased his gathering of scientific and technical data during walks in the woods. And then finally, in 1854, Walden was published. Walden was the account of the time that Thoreau spent out in the cabin where he lived in partial solitude. He began by telling about how small of an amount of money he spent and how small the house was, and that he didn't really need a big house or a lot of money to get by the way he wanted to. Then he went on to tell how he planned to live deliberately and deal with only the essential facts of life and not worry about all the material things that people worry about. Thoreau then goes on to tell about the things that change throughout the year, like the leaves on the trees and the colors of the plants, and then the pond, how it froze over, and how the animals were different during the winter. And in his conclusion, Thoreau criticizes conformity, saying that people should live by the beat of their own drum, as he did. If Thoreau himself were giving this speech, he would tell us to do what we feel is right and what makes us happy as an individual, because success cannot be found where you're not happy. Thank you for your time.